makes the ocean off Peru the equivalent of a tropical rainforest. It teems with anchovies and other fish, which support many millions of gulls, cormorants, and pelicans. They nest on cliffs and on small coastal islands. The tale of El Niño begins at the bottom, with the droppings which bury nesting sites to depths of up to 30 meters.
It all began with bird guano. Bird guano was an enormous industry in 19th century Peru. Peruvian bird guano is the finest natural nitrogen-rich fertilizer in the world. They exported to Europe and North America some staggering sum, something like $200 million in 19th century dollars worth of guano.
The industry was so important that any threat to feces production was viewed with the utmost seriousness. Such a threat emerged in the late 1860s. The anchovy shoals disappeared, dooming to starvation many of the seabirds upon which the guano industry depended. Although fish and bird populations had recovered within a few seasons, local scientists puzzled over the mystery. At the time, few understood the close relationships between animals and their environments.
And it wasn't until the late 1880s and early 1890s that these scientists talked to the fishermen, and the fishermen said, it is El Niño, the Christmas child. A warm current from the north which flows down the coast, removes the cold water which nourishes the anchovies, and the birds go with the anchovies or starve. And we always call this El Niño because it comes at Christmas, the Christmas child. And in 1891, a Peruvian scientist announced this to an international conference, and El Niño entered the scientific literature. But it entered it as a local phenomenon.
The occasional warm northern current, which so disrupted local fisheries, coincided with the rarest of events in the coastal desert: torrential rain. As the century turned, the strange current came once more, and with it, storm and flood. In 1899, as in 1998, entire communities were swept away. It prompted the gentlemen scientists of Peru to announce that El Niño exerted a very great influence over their part of the world. None suspected its true nature, its tremendous power, its phenomenal reach. Half a world away, the last months of the 19th century were consumed by horrors far greater than Peru's rivers of mud. The twin catastrophes of drought and hunger.
There were a series of truly devastating famines in India caused by the failure of the Indian monsoon. Because farmers depend on the annual rain brought by the monsoon. millions, and I mean millions of people died because there was not the infrastructure in India, created by the colonial authorities, to bring famine relief. And in 1904, the Indian Raj, the Indian government, appointed a director of meteorology called Gilbert Walker to try and forecast monsoons. In the finest British fashion, they appointed Gilbert Walker, who had absolutely no meteorological experience at all.
What Gilbert Walker lacked in meteorology, he made up for with dogged persistence. Walker was a statistician, a numbers man, and he applied those skills to the intricacies of the monsoon, the period from June to October, in which falls most of India's annual rains.
Sir Gilbert Walker hired lots of what now we wouldn't call them that, but computers. He hired people who sat there and did the math. He just correlated everything with everything, trying to find out what gave him the best clue.
This was Walker's great breakthrough. His was the first serious attempt to forecast local events by studying distant weather patterns. Walker discovered that monsoon failures in India often coincided with aberrant weather elsewhere. Flooding rains on the Pacific coast of the Americas, droughts in Egypt, Africa, and Australia, unusually mild winters in Canada and New England. With his team of number-crunching clerks, Walker was searching for strategic points of world weather. Atmospheric systems with wide-ranging influence, even global influence.
Because he was convinced that there was a link between monsoons and pressure changes over enormous distances. And in 1921, he identified a seesaw-like oscillation of pressure in the Southwest Pacific, which measured basically the pressure difference between Darwin, Australia, and Tahiti, and named it the Southern Oscillation.
Walker's findings emerged from thousands of barometer readings recorded over decades. Most of the time, atmospheric pressure at Darwin was relatively low, and at Tahiti, relatively high. But every 3 to 7 years, this pressure profile temporarily reversed. Walker claimed this oscillation of pressure was a phenomenon of enormous importance to world weather, a claim for which he was ridiculed by his peers.